we have it. Let's see if we can figure this out over here. Today's broadcast is being sponsored by... I don't have it over here. Can you want to help me out over here? I still have last week's.
Because you're one of the sponsors. It's like being called up for an aliyah, right?
It's like calling myself up. Oh, here it is. Yeah. Today's broadcast is being sponsored by myself. This was my father's yahrzeit, which is today. Rabbi Yisrael ben Yisrael, which is 34th yahrzeit. Amen. And it's also sponsored by Akiva Balter family, the Nishmas, Yonatan Gershon ben Rabbi Yisrael Halevi, Alav Shalom, and his yahrzeit is Shushan Purim, right?
Yeah, no, it's Thursday.
Right, and Tzipori Rachel Bas Reb Simcha Shalom, whose yahrzeit is Purim. Shushan Purim Dmokpin.
Yeah, Purim Dmokpin.
Tainish Masam True and B'tzorah Chaim. Okay. So let's see where we're holding. So we are on Gimel Amud Beis. So let's start from Abaye. Amar Abaye, Pshitali, it's partial to me. Please remind me when it's 6:27 that I have to stop. Amar Abaye, Pshitali, Yadash L'Adam, Eina, the hand of a person, I'm sure, is not like a Rishus HaRabim and not like a Rishus HaYachid. Let's see Rashi. Omar Abaye Pshitali, it's the last of the four wide lines at the top of the Amud. Omar Abaye Pshitali Mimas Nisan. It's clear to me from the Mishnah. The Yadu Shal Adam Hapshuto Rishus Acheres. If the hand of a person is stretched out into another Rishus, Einen is rekas achar gufay legamrei liyos kishus shu oimid ba. Bein shu rishus hayachad, bein shu rishus harabim. Someone is standing in rishus harabim, and he extends his hand into rishus hayachad. We definitely don't say that the hand that he has extended into rishus hayachad, it's as if it's in rishus harabim, or vice versa. If the person is standing in rishus hayachad, his hand is stretched out and extended into the rishus harabim, you don't say that his hand is like it's a rishus harabim. That I know for sure. How do I know that? Kishus harabim lo damya. I know it's not considered like a rishus harabim. Miyadi the ani from the case in the Mishnah of the yad the ani. What does that mean, Dr. Rashi? Kishus harabim lo damya. Kishus harabim lo damya miyadi the ani. The katanim es nisan. Our Mishnah says very explicitly, the chinata balabais mitoicha pater. If the ani was standing b'chutz and he passed an article in his hand from the outside to the inside, the balabayis who takes the object out of the ani's hand and does the anacha, he's pater. If the ani's hand was considered as if it was b'rishus harabim, then the balabayis would not have been able to take the chayfetz out, because he would be doing both an akira from the hand which is considered like rishus harabim and the anacha. Now, kishus hayachid lo damya, I know that the hand is not like a Rishus HaYachid. Miyadi the Balabais from the opposite case. Zok Rashi, Rishus HaYachid l'damya, im pshuta l'Rishus HaRabim. When the Balabais extended his hand from Rishus HaYachid to Rishus HaRabim, the Ani took the chayfetz out of the hand of the Balabais. The Mishnah says, Potter. Zok Rashi, Miyadi the Balabais, the Ketani not l'Ani m'toicha Potter. So clearly the hand of the Balabais is not considered like it's a Rishus HaYachid. But boy Abaye asks a shayla, how about Yodei Shalodam Ma'u Sheta'asa Kekarmelis? Should we treat it like a karmelis? And a karmelis, we know, has a status that it's also to carry to and from a Rishus HaRabim from a karmelis, and it's also to carry to and from a Rishus HaYachid from a karmelis. So when the hand got extended out, do we now say that this hand is like it's in a karmelis, and therefore he can't pull it back? Mikansu Rabbanon ahadur lagabe. Did the Rabbanon make a knas and say that your hand's like a karmelis and you may not return your hand back to you? Or do they say you could pull your hand back in? Zok Rashi boyabai hashdet the chazinon the loy basar gufay shadin law le'inin yichiyuva midaraisa. Now that we see that we don't give the hand the same status as where his feet are planted, Lagabi being mechayev somebody taking it out of his hand, midaraisa, alma iflig rishusa. You definitely see that there's a disconnect between where he's physically standing and where his hand is. So based on that, mi achmer Allah Rabbanan l'mahava karmelis. Did the Rabbanan give his hand a special status as a karmelis? If someone had a hand that was full of something, he was holding a keli in his hand, and he was in Rishus HaYochid, and he stretched his hand out to Rishus HaRabim, do we say that lo yachzirana etzloi, he may not return his hand, he may not return the keli back into Rishus HaYochid, u'sehekach pshuta acha techshach, and he has to stay there frozen until Motzoi Shabbos. The kivin the lav basar gufay greira, since we don't say that his hand is as if it's in the same domain as where his guf is, nasis law rishus acheres midrabanan. Let's say that his hand is now considered like it's in a different rishus midrabanan. The gazer rishus midivreim l'Shabbos. The Rabbanan made a new domain. They invented a new domain, l'gabe hilchos Shabbos, which is called a karmelis. She'asur lahachnus u'lahoitz mimenu l'shus hayochid u'l'shus harabim u'shmoi karmelis. This new domain that Chazal made up was a karmelis, which does not have the status of Rishus HaYochid, and it does not have a status of Rishus HaRabim, and therefore you would not be able to go to anywhere from this karmelis. K'detanya Pirkin, like we'll see on Daf Vav Amud Aleph, Daled Rishuyos l'Shabbos. There's 4 Rishuyos l'Shabbos. We discussed that earlier. Rishus HaYochid, Rishus HaRabim, karmelis, and Mokum P'tur. Now where does the word karmelis come from? Akiva will help us if we can't figure it out. Loshin Ya'aroi v'Karmeloi. It's like a forest and his Carmelo, his Carmela.
I guess it means his
what?
His grapevine.
I'm not.
In other words, it's open. I think so.
She'enoi loy hiluch tomid l'rabim. It's something that's not a public thoroughfare, but on the other hand, v'loy tashmish rishus hayochid. But it's not private either. It's not completely private. It's not completely public. It's like a website.
Depends on the settings, right?
I'm talking about with the privacy setting.
Oh.
So the shaila is mikon tzuha rabban ladur lagabei Eloi. So Rashi says mikon tzuha hoyel v'hiskol ba be'eser. Since he should never have moved his hand out, so he started up. It's not like he's an innocent guy and suddenly bam he gets hit with coronavirus. He started. He had something in his hand. He was in Rishus HaYochid, and he stretched it out in Rishus HaRabim. That was something that he was not allowed to do. So once he did something that he was not allowed to do, all the Rabbanan cancer, then now he may not pull his hand back. And the knas is using the mechanism of a karmelis.
According to this, in our Mishnah, the Baal Abayis would be chayav because he's doing Akiva from a karmelis, which is his own rishus.
In which case, specifically?
The Oni sticks his hand through the window.
Right.
And the Baal Abayis takes it and puts it down in his house.
So that would be removing from a karmelis.
Right,
but true. But even without that, it's usher because you're not allowed to do. The Rabbanan already said you're not allowed to do an akira without a hanacha, or a hanacha without an akira, because it could lead to doing both. Right? Zok to Gemara. Toshma. Hoyse yadoi milei pears. Your hands were full of pears, and you were standing in a Rishus HaYochid. V'yitzia lechutz, and you stuck your hand out to bring the pears to Rishus HaRabim. Tanach Tani Chada, we have one Mishnah, one brayso that said Osir Lachsira, you may not pull your hand back in. V'Tani Idach Mutar Lachsira. So there's in fact a machlokes of braysos. My love, let's say that this machlokes hinges on the shaila that we just discussed from Abaye. The Marsavar, the brayso that says that you're not allowed to pull your hand back in. Kekarmelis Damya. His hand is like a karmelis, and he may not bring the pears back inside. Umar Savar and the Manama holds that you don't have to that you could pull your hand back in. So that's exactly our shaila. So you don't have a raya from there to our shaila at all, because it's possible that both braysos, side of the brayso that says you're allowed to pull it back, and side of the brayso that holds you're not allowed to pull it back, is kekarmelis tamya. They both hold that in our case you would not be able to pull your hand back in. But v'lei kasha. Over there, there's no problem. because kan lamata me'asar, the brayso that says you may not pull your hand back in is speaking when you're below 10 tvachim, and kan lamata me'asar, and the brayso where it says you're allowed to pull your hand back in is if it's above 10 tvachim. What is that distinction? Zok Rashi, lamata miyud, if it's below 10, rishus harabim hu, then your hand is in rishus harabim, because we know the rishus harabim extends up to 10 tvachim. So if your hand is below 10 tvachim, your hand is really in rishus harabim. So if your hand is in a rishus harabim deraisa, kantsu rabbanon v'shavu karmelis. Only there did the rabbanon say that your hand will have a din of a karmelis and you can't pull it back. The lehadra, you shouldn't bring it back. But if it's l'mayla miyud Dr. Rashi, the avir mokim turu, the airspace above 10 tvachim in rishus harabim is a mokim ptur. Kiditnan ba'azorik, hazorik dalad amis bekoisel l'mayla miyud tvachim. If you throw an object 4 amish in rishus harabim, but it's above 10 tvachim, it's kizorik ba'aver upotter. So if you have, let's say, a wall that's 10 tvachim high, and you roll something along the top of that wall, it's as if you're throwing it in the airspace in a makam tur, because it's above 10 tvachim from the ground. To lehav rishus harabim l'mayla miyud. Hilchach therefore loy konsua. Rabban did not answer the lav yisur of it. There's no issur involved, so you wouldn't have a right to our shaila where there is an issur involved. The Ibayah Sema, or you could say another chiluk between the shaila by the payers and the two brises in our case is ema idi v'idi lamata me'asar. Maybe both cases side that asers and side that matter is below asar, and you still don't have a raya v'lav k'karmelis tamya, and we're not giving it another karmelis v'loy kasha, but the machlok is over there is a different shaila. Kan mi b'oy joim, kan misha chashecha. Mi b'oy joim, if he put his hand out to b'oy joim where there was no issur involved, like on Rabbanan. The Rabbanan didn't count him because mi b'oy joim he was allowed to stick his hand out. There was no problem. It's choil. But misha chashecha. But if he put his hand, meaning if he put the pairs that are in his hand, he stretched it from rishus hayachid to rishus harabim on Shabbos, then konsua Rabbanan. The havamina of what?
If it's chol. If it's chol, then it's chol, so it's not. I don't get it.
You don't understand why we would cancel or why we wouldn't cancel?
What's the shaila to begin with? If it's chol.
Why we would cancel?
Yeah.
Well, if they hold, the knas doesn't necessarily have to mean because he did something wrong. If you hold that his hand has a din of a karmelis, right now his hand has a din of a karmelis, it's sitting in rishus harabim, or it's sitting in a karmelis, the pairs are sitting in a karmelis, he's in rishus hayachid. By pulling it back in, he's in effect taking something from a karmelis and he's putting it into a rishus hayachid.
If it's chol, I mean, on a chol, it's a problem.
No. So on chol, there's no problem for Shabbos. But we're on Shabbos now. Right now we're on Shabbos.
Said one place it's chol,
Yeah, he stuck his hand out b'choil, so he didn't do anything wrong. But right now, by Shehu Shom, there might be a problem of pulling it back.
And then it became Shabbos?
Correct. While everybody else was in Shul Kabbalah Shabbos, he was doing curls.
This asura is asura avos or asura tvachim?
Tvachim.
So isn't the hand of the person always over 10 tvachim?
Why would you say that? You're saying if a person's standing for that. And what if a person's not standing?
So that's what we're talking about now?
I guess so.
Sitting?
I guess so. Well, let's know.
If he puts his hand through the rishus empty,
There's no problem at all.
and then the balabais puts something in his hand, would he not be allowed to even drop it?
Oh, so that's.
Carves into rishus hayachid.
Oh, so you're bringing up a very, very geshmak shayla. Here we're talking about if he put it b'chashecha, he did a navla. If he did it b'vajoy, he didn't do a navla. So you're asking, what would be the question? What would be the look if I stuck my hand out on Shabbos, but it was empty, and then someone put something into my hand? There, can I bring it back?
Can I even drop it? And now it's in a carves and putting carves to rishus hayachid.
I wouldn't be allowed to. So that will be totally what we're saying here. If they only made this gezerah, if you stretched out your hand illegally, then it's not a shaila there. But if they answered, even if you put your hand out b'choil, then who adin on Shabbos if you stuck your hand out and someone put something in where there was no issue involved up until that point, it would be the same shaila. That's right. That's right. It would be the same shaila. If you hold that they're geyser, even if you put your hand out originally when it was chayil, you're giving another example of a similar case, where when I originally put my hand out, it was not done b'isser. The Gemara's example is if it was done b'chayil. Your example is if you put it out empty. It would pashas be the same thing. Yeah. So zok the Gemara, we say idi vidi lamatam yud tvachim v'lavka karmel stam yud lamahaver shus latzma karmel bojoim. If a shita me bojoim, if you stretch your hand up me bojoim and no issue was involved, and Rabbi Yisrael is saying a good thing. I think he's saying a very good horror. Who didn't if you stuck your hand out on Shabbos but you was empty, and after you stuck your hand out, someone put the payers into your hand. So again, it was done without any isser. You found yourself in that predicament without any isser. Then machzira mishatechshach. Then you're allowed to pull it back in. The lavrishus la'atzmahi. We're not really saying that it didn't have a carmelis. Alabasa gufa graver. We say that the hand is like in the same place as where his guf is. But kamishatechshach hashita mishachashecha. If you did it be'isser, then kontsua they made a knas. Not that they gave it a din of a carmelis, because if they gave it a din of a carmelis, what's the difference if you stuck your hand up be'isser or beheter? Rather, it's an independent knas that you should never have put yourself into such a bad situation. If they really made it into a carmelis, it's dam a knas. So therefore, the Gemara wants to look at where you didn't do it there when you stretched your hand out, and kan mishachashecha and they did cancer when you stretch your hand out be'isser, and you did it already when it was Shabbos. In fact, if anything, as far as the opposite, that if you stretch your hand out mishachashecha, then they should be matir. Why is that? We don't mind giving him such a knas. You know why? Because if I tell you that for the next 20 hours you have to hold your hand out holding this cluster of grapes, there's a very good chance you're going to get tired and you're going to drop it. So if you put your hand out mibojoim, even if worst case scenario you drop it, there's no isser involved because you didn't make the akira on Shabbos. If he can't manage to hold it the whole Shabbos and he lets go, there it wouldn't come to chatos. So there the Rabbanan should say, don't pull your hand back in, because worst case scenario, it won't lead to an isser. But mishecha shecha, if when he stuck his hand out on Shabbos, you make a knas that he can't bring it back in, well, the shadulei, he might get tired. If you force him to stay in that impossible situation until much of Shabbos, you know what, he might drop it. And if he drops it, then he'll really be in hot water. Then also build the chiv chatas. That'll actually bring him to a chiv chatas. The Rabbanan should never put someone into such a situation where if he can't withstand exera, instead of him only being over an Issur Rabbanan, now they're actually bringing him to be over an Issur Raisa. They're making things worse. That sounds like a typical law that the liberals would enact without thinking it through, and then they have to deal with unintended consequences. So to Gemara, I'm sorry, let's see Rashi. If he stretched his hand out during the day, if you answer him to pull his hand back, and he ends up dropping the chayfetz because it's too much of a tircha for him, the worst case scenario, they would not have caused him to have been over an Issur D'Oraisa. The Akira b'Shabbos. The Akira was not done on Shabbos because he extended his hand before Shabbos. Ela hanocha l'chudei. All he did was a hanacha. V'isur d'Rabbanan hu de'ika, and that only involves an Issur D'Rabbanan because the asa miktsasa. He only did part of a malacha. He did a hanacha without an akira, and that's only asa d'Rabbanan. Uchedetnan shneim peturin. Like in the case of our Mishnah, where the Ani did a hanacha and the Balaam did an akira, or vice versa, they're both potter, avalusuin, but it's osir. So therefore, kansur rabban shalo yachsirena. There the Chum would count to him that he shouldn't pull it back in because it wouldn't lead to an Issur D'Oraisa. If he put his hand from Rishus HaYachid to Rishus Rabbim when it was night, meaning he made a akira, the Ishadi Le'miyoda, if he drops it now in Rishus Rabbim, the knas, because of the knas that we said he cannot pull his hand back in, if he ends up dropping it, Nimta mischayiv chatos im shoygiku. It would end up being a chatos because the sum total he did a full malacha. The Obed le'akira, the hanocha. They did both. He did both an akira on Shabbos and the hanocha on Shabbos, and that in fact would be on the malacha deraisa. The Rabbanan don't want to put him into such a situation where it makes matters worse. He started off with an Isra Rabbanan, and now he's going to end up doing an Isra Deraisa. They're like an Isra Rabbanan. The mutav shaloi niknesenu, we're better off not canceling him, mishenigraim lovoy lidei chil Shabbos Deraisa, to cause that he would end up doing a full malacha and be over chil Shabbos. Umedaloi chaysheses lahachim, since this was not a concern, because the teretz that you proposed was that we will cancel him if he extended his hand illegally. And we don't care if he ends up being over a deraisa. Right now he did an isser, and we're going to cancel him that he may not pull his hand back in. From the fact that you suggested such a teretz, tivshad, you could bring a raya boy to Rabibi. You could bring a raya to a different shaila that Rabibi had, whether or not the Rabbanan will put someone into a position where it could come to an isser deraisa. Nimnu chachamim milahayim devrayim mipnei chashash shemer lo yamit ha'adam behem. Where Bibi said that the Chacham will never refrain from making an gzeira and enforcing their words. They will not refrain from doing that because they're worried that he might be nichshal further v'yasa iser chamer. Zok the Gemara, umidaloi kamish hanin hachi. Since you didn't suggest this difference, that we don't want to put him into a position where he might be over a bigger iser, tivshay de Rabibi, that should really expose your opinion on Rabibi Shaila, the Rabibi Bar Abaye. The boy Rabibi Bar Abaye, Hiddik Pas Betaner. Now it's interesting, if you plant something, you put a seed into the ground, the moment it takes root, oh, we have 1 more minute, okay, let's finish off our thing, make a burn the fudges. Okay, we have 1 minute. I just want everyone to know that we're not violating the tinus. It's not the tinus. We have 1 minute left. Okay, I am so thirsty now. Okay, so it's very when you plant a seed, the moment it takes a little bit of a root, you're over. However, when you bake something, you have to get the results before you're over. So it's a unique malacha. Even though you did whatever you need to do, you've already put the dough into the oven, you're not going to be over until the results are here, until the thing is baked. So there's a time delay from between when you did the action to be over the isser to when you're actually over the isser. Meaning, if I put dough in the oven, if I just leave it the way it is, it's going to come to an isser deraisa. But if I can get it out before it bakes, even though I did the maisa that would normally bring me to an isser deraisa, I could prevent it from happening. I can undo a malacha. So what's unique about the malacha of baking is that you can undo it after you do it, because after you start it, because you're not over completely until the results of your action take effect. So Zok the Gemara, what would happen if hidbik pas betaner? You illegally put pas into the tanner. In those days, the bread would be stuck to the wall of the oven. So he slapped it onto the wall of the oven, and now it's going to continue to bake. And if it does complete baking, the person will be over an isur deraisa. Now, as a standalone gzeira, what if you baked something before Shabbos? What happens if you put a challah into the oven before Shabbos and it's fully baked? Are you allowed to take that bread out on Shabbos? So Redis Apas, the Gemara says it's chokmah ve'ina melacha, but the Rabbanan were geyser that you're not allowed to take bread out of the oven, even though no isur was done. There's no isur deraisa done. The bread was put into the oven before Shabbos. Maybe it was even baked before Shabbos, but you're not allowed to scrape it out of the oven on Shabbos. There's such an isur. So the question is, under normal circumstances, when there's no isur involved, it was put in before Shabbos, it was baked before Shabbos, they don't let you take it out. Well, what happened if someone put it in all Shabbos? Now, if the Rabbanan enforced their gzeira not to take it out, then this guy is going to be over a deraisa. He has no way to fix what he did. But if we'll relax the prohibition of taking the bread out of the oven on Shabbos, we can save him from being over a deraisa. So should we do it? That was Rabbi Shaila.
What's that? Why? Once he put it in the oven, he was over already. Why?
He's not over until it's fully baked.
Oh, he put it in a raw. Well, if it was
Yes, if you
cooked,
put it
there's
in baked,
no
it's not a problem.
issue.
Yeah.
So you
Put it in raw,
and
and
it's
if you can
over
get it
when
out.
it gets cooked. When is the over? When is the avera chal?
So when is it considered baked? I think there's a shaila. Well, I think we're
Okay,
going to get to the
depends
shaila
on-
if it's when
It's lafa or
if
it's
it's
brown.
hardened.
Yeah, we discussed
top
it.
hardened, the bottom hardened. The
So
shaila
he's
is about
got 30
fully baked.
seconds maybe or a minute and a half. You're saying.
I don't know exactly what the exact timing
It's
is.
a lafa. It's
Right.
not long,
Okay,
right?
Yeah, that's right. But it's not a lot of matter.
It's short.
Okay, then it goes.
Oh.
Right.
Before he's over, so he has a chance to see. What's that?
The equivalent
that's
of
for
machmir
me.
d'sui
Machmir
by a
d'sui, that
tapsel,
was me.
but yeah.
Right. I didn't realize bread.
Okay, so now the question is: they have an overarching prohibition of taking bread out of an oven. Will they relax that issur if it can prevent somebody from coming to chiv chatas? So tivshait, from the fact that you're saying that we make a gzeira, we should be able to bring a raya the lo hitiroi, that they were not mater, and we don't care if someone's going to be an over. So it seems from the way you're learning that in fact we're not concerned if someone will come to a deraisa, we're not going to relax their abundant condition.
Should a person purposely be over the rabbanon, not to be over the deraisa, or leave?
Well, that's the shaila. That's precisely what the shaila of Rabbi Bavai.
Over the rabbanon. Our shaila is if the rabbanon should relax their issue. I'm saying if a person did it, should he talk about over the rabbanon so that he doesn't have to bring a chatas, he's not over the deraisa?
That's a very good shaila. The Gemara is going to get to that. So you're saying even if the rabbanon don't relax it, maybe I should save my skin anyway. What am I supposed to do?
Maybe.
That shaila is going to come.
want you to do it.
The rabbanon say
can't
it's also
tell you
to
to
do it
do it.
anyway. It's also to do it anyway. So that shaila is going to come very much into play on Amud Aleph. So we'll see that. So the Gemara, kasha. But Tivshot, I'm not afraid. I'm not afraid at all. Somebody once went to Reb Shlomo and asked them a question. I'm not going to get into what the politics of the question was. It was a hot political issue. Nagayat HaMoitzid in the city. So when they asked Reb Shlomo the Shaila, someone was a little bit of a mechutzif and said, "Well, I'm taping you, so you're not going to be able to weasel your way out of this." He didn't say the truth, but I'm taping you. So you're taping me? Give me your tape recorder. Grab the tape recorder. I'm saying to Pel Mole, if you do this, I'm going to shut you down. I'm not afraid of your tape recorder. And they gave it back to him. The guy ended up apologizing later, but he had backbone. So that's Gemara saying, I'm not afraid. You're telling me, you're threatening me that I'm going to push you to Shaila. Push you to Shaila. I have no problem. You're right. The Rabbanan will enforce their takana, even though it can lead to a nishtoraisa. Maybe we'll weasel our way out of it. Maybe we shouldn't be pushing that Shaila. Maybe in fact we have a good Shaila, and maybe the Rabbanan would relax their issur of Ridias Apas in order to prevent someone from being over Nish Deraisa. But V'loi Kasha, going back to our Shaila, we had one brisa that said with the parish you're allowed to pull your hand back in. One brisa said with the parish you can't pull your hand back in. Kan b'shogig, kan b'mezid. If you only put your hand out b'shogig, then we'll let you pull it back in. But b'mezid, we won't let you pull it back in. B'shogig lo kensur abanon, b'mezid kensur abanon. So that's another option for the two brises where it won't impact our Gemara. And it won't impact the Shaila of Rabbi Bar Abaye. Okay, I think we're in the middle of Rashi. So let's hear Rashi. Hidvik pas b'taner, b'Shabbos. He put pas in the Taner on Shabbos. B'shogi, but he put it in B'shogi. And then v'nizker shehu Shabbos kodim shetafa. He remembered that it was Shabbos before the bread got fully baked. The kaim alon, and we know, and we're going to learn it at the end of the towards the end of the Masechta, the Ridias Hapas Shvusi, scraping bread out of an oven is an Issur D'Rabbanan. Shehi Chachma ve'eina Malocha. So the halacha is Hitiru Loi es Issur Midivrayim. They were mater him this Issur that they have, which is a Rabbanic Issur to do Ridias Hapas. The Yordana, we tell him he should take the pas out, Kodim Shetayafa before it becomes fully baked. V'yischayev Mishemoifa. Shu Av Malocha. So do we say that will relax our Isser, so we can quickly take it out and avoid the Isur Deraisa, or maybe not. And therefore you cannot bring a raya to the Shaila of Rav Bibi from our Gemara. Because you can say both ways. The Haida loy can't say b'shoigeg. The reason why they didn't count him, if you only stick a hand up b'shoigeg, is lav mishum chashasha, the dilma shadi luhu miyadehu. It's not because of a chashash that he might drop it. El mishum the avadi surah b'mezid. It's because he didn't do it in a very b'mezid. He only did it b'shoigeg. The chazaris yadoi eina afilu shvus, and pulling his hand back in is not even a derabbanon. Eloi mishum knasa, if it's not for the fact that the rabbanon would make this knas. And maybe over here, since it was a shoygig, they didn't make the knas. Alva rediyas apas shvusu rediyas apas, even without doing the avera of putting the bread in the oven, rediyas apas is an independent takona that they're not allowed to do. Here the issue to bring your hand back in was a reaction from the chachamim to the fact that you put your hand out. Rediyas apas has nothing to do with the fact that you did an issur. Rediyas apas is a standalone issur d'Rabbanan. You're not allowed to take bread out of an oven. So therefore, the Mcgillvray b'minyan, and there was a gzeira done with a minyan of Rabbanim to paskin that rediyas apas should be also b'Rabbanan. Umishum koidim sheyavo l'dei chiv chatos le'botlik l'zerosum. They will not be mevatel their otherwise freestanding gzeira over the fact that now in this specific case it could come to a deraisa. Well, the issur nami lo tifshod, and you can't bring a raya that they would aser midakonsu b'mezid, from the fact that when you stuck your hand out with pears, they counted you from bringing it back in. Because again, the hosam lekal mechish demo lishtinu sheyischayev Mrs. Bezdin. Maybe we hold that you don't have to be choshish that the guy's going to drop it, and maybe he won't drop it. It's not guaranteed that if we don't let his hand come back in, he's for sure going to drop it. Maybe he won't drop it. Aval but a case of rediyas apas, he can sinile milirdois. If you don't let him take it out, al kochach yischayev Mrs. Bezdin. It will for sure lead to an issur deraisa, right? If we say you can't bring your hand back in, no one said you have to drop it. You might be able to hold on to it, and then it won't come to an issur at all. But rediyas apas, if the bread's in the oven and baking, and we only take it out, it will for sure bake fully, and it will for sure lead to a deraisa. So maybe there they would not make. So no matter whether or not we're goyzer here or not, will have no impact on the halacha of rediyas apas. Or we have another option as to how to understand the machlokes between the two tanoim by the pairs, where it doesn't bring a raya to our shaila. Idi v'idi b'shoigig. They might both be b'shoigig. V'hacha b'kantu shoigig atu mezid kamituli. Do they by mezid there's a knas? Do they also extend that knas to a shoigig as well? Mar sovar kantu shoigig atu mezid. If you put your hand out to shoigig, we'll ask you for bringing it back in the same way we ask you for bringing your hand back in if you put your hand out to mezid. Umar shavuot kantu shoigig atu mezid. Or you can have another pshat. They were not kind of shoigig atu mezid. And in both cases, you stretched your hand out with the fruit from Rosh Hashanah to Rosh Hashanah, b'shoigig. But v'lo kasha, kan l'oisa chotzer, kan l'chotzer acheres. The shaila here is not whether or not you're allowed to bring it back to the same chotzer that you're in, where for sure it would be mutter. The whole shaila is, are you allowed to put it into a different chotzer? Zok Rashi l'oisa chotzer, shehu amid b'soicha, there it's mutter l'achsira. Aval l'chotzer acheres hasmucha l'asur l'zorkam. The problem is, the shaila that we're asking is if it's mutter l'achsira. If I'm going to put it into another chotzer, that's not called chazorah. That's called moving it from one rishos into another rishos. So Tosfos right away asks the first Tosfos on Amid, kan l'chotzer acheres, v'asu l'achzira dekatani, and the words asu l'achzira, it doesn't mean lo l'achzira etz l'kamar. It doesn't mean returning your hand to yourself. It means l'achzira, return it l'chotzer acheres. So it's stretching the meaning of l'achzira. Okay. Kan l'chotzer acheres. Kedaboy min eirav mirav nachman. Hayu yadai malaya pears. If his hand was full of pears, v'yitzia l'chutz, and he stretched his hand outside, mal l'achzira la'isa chotzer. Mal l'achzira la'isa chotzer. Amar mutter. Yeah, bringing it back to the same chotzer for sure is going to be mutter. L'chotzer acheres mahu. What's the halacha about putting it into a different chutzner, there he said asur. Umayshna, why is it asur to put it into a different chutzner, but it's not asur to bring it back into the same chutzner? So he told him, L'chiteichel Allah kur de milcha. What does this mean? L'chiteichel Allah kur de milcha. Zokt Rashi, Bibidichusa hadilei. It was like a sharp line. And he told him, Kishetim degli kur shol melach. You want to know the answer? That's not for free. The psak I gave you for free. You want the reasoning behind the psak? That you have to pay. You have to buy the upgraded subscription to get the answer, to get the reasoning for the answer. Then that's one shot. And the other shot of L'chiteichel Allah kur de milcha, it's not a charge. It's L'chiteichel Allah kur shal melach. And somehow in those days they thought that if you ate salt, it made you smart. So even if you eat a core of salt, you won't be able to figure this one out on your own. So what is the difference? If you put it back into your own chutzner, there it's mutter. You know why? Because you never accomplished what you wanted to do, and that was to transfer the payers from this rishus to a different rishus. But if you're going to end up putting the payers into a different chutzner, is avida machshavosai, kum dechois, you accomplished this thing that you wanted to accomplish, and that was to transfer the payers from one rishus to another rishus. So kashi machshavosai, shenischaven lefnoisa mechotzer zeh, your original kavanah that you wanted to try to get the payers out of this chutzner, leniskaima, because it boomeranged right back into the same rishus that you started from. That's why they're not going to prohibit you from putting your hand back. But to allow you now to put it into a different rishus hayochid, so what you wanted to do, you wanted to transfer the payers out, and that we don't want you to do. Therefore, today you might just be extending the payers out to put into another rishus hayochid, which is not an isser. But if we allow you to do that, then tomorrow you might decide that you want to transfer these payers from rishus hayochid to rishus harabim, and that is a real deraisa. Therefore, we're not going to allow you to put your hand and bring the payers anywhere else besides back where it started from.
Even the Rabbanan is no isser from one rishus hayochid to the second rishus hayochid?
I don't think so. Rishus hayochid to rishus hayochid, we have a problem? Then it's the Rabbanan. It's the Rabbanan Shal of Aver. Okay, yeah.
This chutzner is
So it must be with the Erev. It must be we're talking about the chutzner chesh with the Erev. Yeah. Zogt Margufa. Now we're going to drill down into Chaim Tzvi Shaila about the Redias Apah Shaila, whether or not if I'm about to be over an Isser Deraisa, should I then go and violate an Isser Derabanan to save my skin? Zogt Margufa. Boy Rav Bibi Barabai. Hidbik Pas Betaner. What happens if someone put pas on a tanner? Now the Gemara Shaila is, let's look at the lashon of Rabbi Shaila. The Shaila is, Hirtiru loy l'radoisa, did they allow you to remove it, koidim shiyavoy l'dei chiv chatos. So that by definition tells us that this must be shogeg, because mezid, you don't get a chatos, right? So a person put it on by mistake, he forgot that it was Shabbos, can you take it off? Oy lo yitiru. So let's get down to the practical aspects, exactly what occurred. If he b'shogig put pas in the tanner, he put dough in the tanner to bake, not knowing that today was Shabbos, not knowing that it was usher to do, so he's oblivious. Ignorance is bliss. So who told him anything? Who told him anything? Who told him that he doesn't? Who told him that he wasn't wearing any clothing? That he has a problem? So what's the shaila if you take it out? He's b'shogig over here. He doesn't know anything about it, right? So if it was b'shogig, who's coming to ask this shaila? So if he didn't know before the bread was fully baked, he didn't realize his mistake, either she Shabbos and he didn't know it was Shabbos, or this malacha is asur, lamana tiru. Who in fact is asking this shaila? He's not asking the shaila. He still doesn't know about it. Lamana tiru he didn't know to ask the shaila. There's a very famous story in the time of Rav Baruch Beresh Yeshiva in Kamenetz. The Haskalah was very strong, and they were yeshiva bracha were going after derech. They were learning, but they were not being Shemer Shabbos. So Agudah Toronto once walked by the dormitory on Shabbos, and he saw smoke coming out of one of the rooms. So he knew someone was smoking a cigarette in his dormitory on Shabbos. So a Baruch burst into the room, and there's 3 Bachim smoking there. So one Bach says, I completely forgot today was Shabbos. And he quickly throws away the cigarette. The second Bach says, I forgot you know how to smoke on Shabbos. How can I forget? And the third Bach says, I forgot to close the window. So the Elulav, so what you have to say is the Adar v'Hipker. Elamai, you have to say that after B'Shogig he put the bread in the oven, he remembered that he's about to be over. So Zok Tamar, Mi Mechayiv, would he be Chayiv? Would he even be Chayiv Chatos? Mich Mechayiv Chatos Bafiyosoi. But now we learned in the Mishnah, Kol Chayiv Chatois, any Chayiv Chatos, Einen Chayovin Ad Shetheit Chiloson Shkoga, V'Soifer Shkoga. He has to be a Shogig the whole time. So Rashi Chiloson V'Soifer, Chilos HaMelocha, when he put the bread in the oven, it had to be Shogig. V'Soifer, and even when it got fully baked, it had to be Lo Noidolo Shilogosor Ad Shenigmar Avera. So the moment he found out, it's not a shogig anymore, he wouldn't be chayav v'chatos, so even if he left it in the oven, he wouldn't be chayav v'chatos. So how could you clear a shayla? Can he take it out of the oven to avoid the chayav v'chatos? At this point that he realized before it was fully baked, even if he didn't take it out of the oven, he wouldn't be chayav v'chatos. Elazar Tamar b'mezid, speaking where he put the bread in the mezid, and the shayla is, can he take it out, kodim shiyavu the isher skila, mi boy. That is the shayla. I did an avera, and I put a bread in b'mezid, can I take it out before I'm chayiv skila? Can I literally save my skin?
He did tshuva in the middle?
No, he got warned. He got warned. So Amar Shila, Lo'olam B'Shogig. It tells the Gemara says then skila meboile. Then kodim shiyavu the skila meboile. If it's a case of b'mezid, the shayla here was kodim shiyavu the chayav chatos. If it's a case of mezid, then you didn't word the shayla properly. Amar Shila Lo'olam B'Shogig. Really, it's speaking of B'Shogig. L'man tir lachem. The shayla is, I never knew that I did an avera, but you saw that I put pas into the oven. Can you go take it out to save my skin from an avera? Could you go do it on Nisr D'Rabbanan to save me from doing an Nisr D'Oraisa, which will be a sugad itself? Okay, I think we should stop here because I think we have to 10 to we start, right? And I got to say brachas.
What does it say about chatos though? How does that say for the chatos though? Who's going to bring the chatos?
In which
the
case?
Guy, the second guy's going to
In which case?
The case where the guy's
I didn't be
save my skin.
Right, I didn't. I'm going to bring the chatos. No, the case of it we slugged up. Because then it's a shayla of skila, it's not a shayla of chatos. So the case of the shayla of chatos has to be where I did a b'shogig. But if I did a b'shogig, you have to say you never found out about it.
Right.
So the shayla is, can you quickly take it out of the oven so that I won't have to bring a chatos?
Well, I'm not going to be over on anything.
On a derbanon. You're over on a derbanon. Can you be over a derbanon to save me from a deraisa? Yeah, sure.
What time?
The main minyan, I think, is 7 o'clock. When's the main minyan? The Sikha minyan. 7:10? So can we learn 6:10? Okay, so we'll learn 6:10. 6:10. Okay, go ahead.